Good morning, everyone. Good evening, good afternoon, and welcome to this week's Weekly Energy Boost. My name is Elisheva, and I am here this morning with David, and we are so excited to be here. This is actually a topic that we have been teasing for, I would say, a few months. The title of today's episode is Nourishing Wellbeing, and what we're really focusing on this week and what the universe is going to invite us to examine is, what is it that feeds us? What are we consuming? And I don't only mean food, which we hope in the next few months to dedicate multiple episodes to the art of spiritual eating and so on and so forth. We're focusing on the idea that whatever we see, read, watch, whatever we listen to, whatever we, even according to Kabbalah, the things that we smell affect our consciousness. And by being more cognizant of what we let into our being, we can achieve, I think that a lot of people, David made a point about this a few weeks ago, that you can be focused, working hard, doing, saying all the right things, quote unquote, meeting all the right people, and yet if you are spending time indulging on looking at things that are not appropriate for you, or things that drag you down, if you're addicted to some sort of gossip outlet and you can't wait to find out who said what or who did what, right? Even though they seem innocuous, right? They're not hurting anybody, right? It's not evil, but at the same time, there is a draining effect. And one of the things we want to look at this week is how powerful, how we can empower what we see, what we hear, what we eat, of course, to some degree. Anything that comes into our being, the more refined we are about that, the more elevated we are about those processes, the more elevated our experience of life will be in general. And it's interesting, too, because the word consume, right? We are consumers of things in the marketplace. People say, well, where do you get your news? What's the media outlet? We use the word consuming for more than just food. And the idea that or let's put it this way, even when we say, I heard something and it took me a while to digest, right? We, even in English at least, and I'm sure it's in other languages as well, we use food-related or digestion-related terminology to describe the process of the input that we receive, both visually and audio. Like it's not a foreign idea that what we bring into our mind and into our bodies is more than just nutrition. And that's really the focus of this week, is understanding that I am nourished by what the shows that I watch, the friends that I call, the articles that I read, just as much as I am nourished by what's on my plate.
Yeah. And I was taking some notes here about this concept of being a consumer. And it just reminded me that I think Jeff Bezos, and I'm paraphrasing here, on his last Amazon earnings call, he said, this is a paraphrase, where he said that the secret to success is when you are creating more than you're consuming. And everybody jumped on that, and they loved what he said, but it kind of goes back to what we teach in Kabbalah, and we teach it in different ways. We use different type of terminology, where if you are a person who's adding more value to the people around you, your community, your business, then you are consuming or receiving or taking from that relationship, then you are in line with the universal energy, and so you will attract the reality you want. And if you had to audit your life, you'd probably see that there are certain areas where you are consuming, taking in more from that person, that business. Sometimes you're hired and you get this great job and you're paid very well, and all you got to do is kind of like work like 1 hour, because you can do in 1 hour what maybe other people can do to do in like 8. So you're thinking, all right, all I have to do is work 1 hour. But when in reality, your spiritual responsibility is to go above and beyond what you're being paid. It's to create a reality where you're giving more than you're receiving. And we think, well, that's unfair. Why should I give more than I'm receiving? But in every part of your life, if you can give more than you receive, then you'll always attract those kind of people also, because we feel drained when we're around people.
That's the secret to great relationships, lasting relationships, is being focused on outdoing your partner.
Outdoing the partner. That's exactly right. I want
in
to outdo.
in a fun and joyful way, not in a malicious and revengeful way, but I want to make sure at the end of the day, I know I've given more than I've demanded.
That's right. And in the beginning of every relationship, that's how it is. We want to impress the other person. We want to go out of our way. We want to show them the skills we have around giving. And it has to do with, I want to show you that I am godly because I have the ability to do anything, to fix anything, to create anything, to make anything happen. And if you can think of relationships in your own life, from day one when you liked somebody, you're finding ways, creative ways. And because you want to do that, you want to be a giver, you start to receive inspiration from the divine, how to be a giver. And that's another concept that we'll go into shortly that I have written down, which is what you desire is the inspiration you draw. So when you really want to give and you don't even know how, and you don't know in what way or in what fashion, but you have this desire, the Creator gives you inspiration and then introduces you to the right path of how to do so. But as time goes on and we get used to people, and I shared this in a class several weeks ago, when you get used to something, it's called simsum. A contraction occurs where the energy and the blessing in that thing disappears. So if you ever feel like something is commonplace, something is normal, I'm used to it by now, I'm familiar with it. We're so close that there's a familiarity between us. At that exact moment,
bad word is comfort.
When I'm comfortable with the person. That is
the four-letter word.
That is, because there's things that you used to do when you were dating the person that you're not, that you wouldn't do when you were dating them, that now maybe you'll do it because you're more comfortable with them. Comfort means there's a contraction of the energy and the energy leaves that scenario. You may not notice it right away, but eventually, as our teacher said, all that's left is the clapping. The show's over. And it's just that hasn't really, the relationship physically is still there, but it's deteriorating as time goes on.
What's interesting to me is that the idea, the whole process that we as human beings go through when we are lacking, right? This is a big thing that we talk about all the time. Our nature is not to preempt, not to predict, we're going to need energy 5 years from now, I better start to invest now. Our nature is to wait until we feel the lack, and then we do something about it. We have a special word for that in Kabbalah. It's reactive, and even though the word reactive exists in the English language without Kabbalah supporting it, the difference is that whenever I'm reactive, I'm basically responding to something external. And the responsive maybe is the better word. We use the word responsive for reacting to what's going on around us. We use the word reactive to that knee-jerk expression or sensation when something outside of us makes us feel one way or the other. So what's interesting when you look at when do I eat or drink, right? My body has a mechanism that says you're thirsty. You need more fluid in your body, grab the water. Or you're hungry, right? I feel a rumble in my tummy, or I feel my energy start to tank. I know that I need to fill the tank again. But when it comes to spiritual energy and nourishment, even though you may say, well, how do I know if I'm lacking energy? You do know, right? When we feel, let's say you hear some news, so-and-so is being promoted from your department to the executive team. What happens in that moment is that external situation may be awakening a sensation of lack, of inadequacy, of fear, of jealousy. And the knee-jerk reaction is to find something to make me feel better, to fill that lack. It may be a piece of chocolate. It may be to remind myself, we had this conversation a few weeks ago, it may be to remind myself that that person is single and lonely and miserable and all they have is this job. It may, right? And all these things are the wrong response, first of all. I want to be clear about that. But in every time we seek to consume something, I wouldn't say every time, but 99% of the time, it's in response to a feeling of emptiness. And the Kabbalists teach that in the same way that I use this metaphor a bit too much in the last few weeks, but if you're training for a marathon, you cannot wait to get hungry to feed yourself. You cannot wait to drink, to be thirsty in order to drink. You need to set up a routine of whether it's carb loading or whatever. What I wouldn't know. I never ran a marathon, but I know from friends that there is a serious regimen in order to build the stamina to be able to do that. Life is not different. Waiting until we feel the need to consume something is an indication that there's an external force in control of me. Our goal is to not only to be in control. I think that that's also a very pretty low level of existence. Our goal is not just to be in control of our desires and our feelings and our words and our emotions and our actions, of course. It is to elevate everything around us. No, food isn't exempt from that. Social situations are not exempt from that. The office is not exempt from that. Our families are not exempt for that. Our role, and this is really what we've translated this week's episode to be about how we nourish ourselves, but the real energy this week, the universe is asking us to make sure that we're elevating every possible scenario that we're given, even the ones when we're alone and nobody's watching, right? We may be already good at being that spiritual, elevated, wise, caring person when we're surrounded by people or we're on camera, but how much are we focusing on elevating our environment, our own selves, when no one's looking?
I remember it's something that people can probably relate to, if we're going to relate it to food, since it was in the post, is when you don't get a good night's rest, your hormones are off, the body's totally off. We can all relate to the way we feel when we don't sleep well. Then, if you notice something, your body starts to crave different kind of foods, more foods, and this is the whole thing.
Well, I would call them fast-acting foods.
Fast-acting foods, where there's some form of instant gratification. And I remember last night I had to wake up early. I didn't have to. Something happened and I woke up early, and I was kind of tired. So then I walked into the kitchen and I saw that my body was asking for things I usually don't eat that early in the morning, but it needed something. It needed whatever it was, some sugar from fruit or whatever it was. It sounds like a stupid example, but I'm sharing it because I know people can relate. There was a moment where I just realized, well, I'm not choosing to eat fruit right now. My body is commanding me. It's controlling me because it has a lack because of something that happened the night before. Just that realization, what's important is, doesn't mean you can't eat the fruit, but it's the realization that you're not in control puts you into control. The realization and the consciousness, because everything we learn in Kabbalah is about consciousness, having consciousness. And when you're not conscious, then you're reactive. And when you're reactive, you disconnect from the light of the Creator and you enter the chaotic reality. But when you are conscious and can say, all right, you know what? My body's telling me to eat the fruit. I'm going to eat the fruit, but I'm going to choose to eat it. And I remember that whenever it comes to food, my wife always tries to give me advice. She said, if you're going to eat it, eat one, not two. It's just so simple. And because if I don't think of that, I'm going to eat two and maybe I'll eat four, because you're trying to feed something until it's satiated. It's like a bug bite. When you scratch it, it feels really good, but eventually it bleeds. And that is how the desire to receive that comes from lack works. You scratch, it feels good, and then it bleeds and it scars. That's how every lack operates. Because the lack is being controlled by what we call in Kabbalah the klipot, the negative forces, the negative system. We think we're wanting something, but the negative forces are controlling it. So we taste a little bit of the energy and then it goes to the negative side, and that's why it bleeds and it scars. So how we can transform that is simply by being conscious. We call it in Kabbalah 1, restriction. We pause. We acknowledge the fact that we're out of control. and then we take control. So you can still do the action if you feel that that's the right thing for you. It's just that you're choosing to do it. And it's just a couple seconds of consciousness can make the whole difference.
That to me brings in the bigger conversation. Why is this even a conversation? Why do the Kabbalists spend the time guiding us into how to navigate things like eating a piece of fruit? I mean, obviously we adapt the same concepts for relationships, for drawing prosperity and all these things, but we also use it for the tiny minutia, like, should I eat an apple right now or not? The overriding or overarching concept is that if I'm focused on what's best for me in the long term, or what's best for my family, or what's best for the company, what's best for my neighborhood, my planet, I'll make a better decision. And the challenge is that when my body is telling me to reach for the Coca-Cola or the chocolate cake or the TMZ, I don't want to badmouth anybody, but you get the idea. What's really happening is that I'm not thinking about how it's going to make me feel in the long term. I'm only thinking about how I'm going to feel right now. How can I either alleviate my sensation of lack, of need, of low energy? By the way, you don't have to be needy in order to choose to consume something that is not going to elevate you. You may just be bored. You may just feel unmotivated, unexcited, unentertained. You might just want some mental stimulation. And the tendency is to go towards something that is going to give me that stimulation quick and for a short period of time that will ultimately leave me low in the long run. So the Kabbalists give us that compass of when it comes to choosing what should I do. And we have questions here that are actually quite interesting about different professions, like say a first responder that's going to be subjected to gruesome real life scenes, filmmakers who need to watch footage, even though the crime scene may be fake, the crime scene can be very gruesome, right? Thinking in terms of how can we best elevate. I think the first step is maybe protecting ourselves, but elevate ourselves as well, even in those scenarios. So to me, that there is two answers to the question. One is in the big picture. And David, I would love to hear your thoughts on this as well. When a person is called to serve, let's say in the police force or the fire department or to be a medic, usually that's a pretty serious calling, right? It's not, they could go into computer programming or police work, right? It's usually, a person is usually driven by a passion to serve, to rescue, to take care, to contribute, and knowing that there is that, even on a soul level, even if it's not a conscious decision, on a soul level, there is an acceptance of the responsibility of what it will mean energetically, right? And I think that what David said before about, maybe I will eat the apple, but I'm not eating it now because it's controlling me, and I'm out. I'm not the one in control, right? I need to, the let's say police officer needs to go to the crime scene and see the chalk outline and the blood that's there for noble reasons, not because it gives him a high to watch it, and he's making this more elevated choice of to protect and to serve rather than I love watching violent movies. I'm going to watch a violent movie. On the shorter scale, right, less big picture, choosing profession and more in the day-to-day, it's always about asking myself, why am I doing it? Mm-hmm. Right? Never letting what's going on in my movie, whether I'm watching nature, National Geographic nature movies, or I'm watching, I don't know, Law and Order. I mean, what's out there these days? That I'm doing it. Why am I doing it? I'm doing it maybe because I need to chill out. I need to take my mind off everything. I need to decompress. As long as I am making the choice and it's not a robotic, knee-jerk habit, it's possible to elevate it even in those situations.
And something to become clear about, because we have a comment here in the chat, is okay, so you want to eat fruit. Isn't that better than eating a brownie? We're not getting into what is right to do. I think a lot of times people are focused on what's the right thing to do. Stay or go. Eat or don't eat. Well, if I eat, what should I eat? These decisions, people always come to us and say, what should I do? And we realize it has nothing to do with what you do. It has all to do with how you do it. So what we're saying is if you eat an orange or a healthy vegetable, but you do it in a way that you're being controlled by the external energy, that vegetable, as healthy as it may be, will connect you to darkness, according to what we're saying.
Can I pause you just 1 second so you give that context? If you're doing it because you're afraid that the scale may show a higher number than you want it to.
That's one of the...
That's just an example of how could it be, how could the how behind a healthy vegetable be not healthy in the long term? If you're compelled to eat it because of fear, self-punishment, I could come up with other ones as well, but I just want to make sure that it's clear.
We want to be really clear about this, because if you take a couple steps back, we learn in Kabbalah that the humanity has entered a world that's called the tree of knowledge, good and evil, which means that everything in this world has both the shell and the fruit. It has the negative side and the positive side. So everything in this world, from the people that we interact with to physical objects that we see, to food that we eat, everything has a good and a bad. That's why it's called the tree of knowledge, good and bad. If I don't have consciousness, or the right consciousness, if I'm not in control of my desires and my urges when I engage with something in the physical world, then I'm drawing from it the negative, the dark side. We're talking spiritual energy here. We're not talking about is the vegetable healthy. We're not talking about is the vegetable healthy. That same vegetable has a good and a bad, has a positive and a negative. So when I don't have consciousness, when I eat the vegetable, I draw from the negative side. Now, what does that mean, the negative side? Just so you know, this is going deeper into what we teach in Kabbalah. The negative side of something means the desire to receive for the self alone side of it, which means that if I eat a piece of fruit without consciousness, what that's going to do is enhance the selfish side within me. So when I become more agitated and I don't know why, when I become more judgmental and I don't know why, when I become more needy and I don't know why, it could very well be because 30 minutes ago I ate at a restaurant without consciousness. So I ate all these great healthy foods, but I ate the negative spiritual side of them.
Or they fed the not spiritual side of me.
As a result, they fed the animalistic side in me, which then is enhancing my anxiety, my fear, my own personal negativity. This is a really deep concept because nobody talks about energy in the way that we're discussing it now. And we're saying you can become immune. You can build an immunity, a vaccination to the negative side of the tree of knowledge simply by having consciousness, simply by pausing just seconds to separate the good and the bad and take control over your desire.
What's interesting to me, I was preparing for today's show, I was thinking about much of what David and I share, and also our other guests share. The source of that wisdom is a book. It's not really one book. It's many books called the Zohar. And one of the interesting things that the Zohar says is that let's put it this way. You can find it all across the Zohar that when it talks about eating food, it talks about the fire in the body consuming this, that the digestion process is almost like burning sacrifices on an altar, right? That's the imagery that we're given. And it's interesting too, because it's the Zohar is talking less about the physical and more about the energetic side, but specifically uses the fire that consumes whatever it is we're eating. What's interesting to me is that there's also various sections in the Zohar that talk about burning your thoughts. Mm-hmm. That you can also, there are certain thoughts, I know that one of the meditations we do on one of the most powerful days of the year is we send those negative thoughts into fire. That the Kabbalists teach even the meditation using fire as a means to burn the negative thoughts, the negative judgments, those belief systems that are detrimental to us. And the fact that both food and thoughts are processed energetically in the same way, to me also says something very important about our thoughts, the things we read, the things we hear. One of the things that we've said in previous episodes is that even, let's say, the books we read, the magazines we read, the content we consume from the internet, that's part of our environment. We're allowing our energy to reside in those words, in those ideas, in those stories. So the question is, and this is what we're really asking our listeners to do, is to evaluate, to look at what is it that I am consuming or that I've consumed. I don't know if it happens to you guys, but for me, I sometimes will have a bad feeling and be like, why do I feel this way? I was having a great day and I don't even remember what happened. And it may be that I got a text that made me, I got a little exasperated, or, my favorite one, no offense to anybody at my kid's school, but whenever the school calls and I see the number on my phone, I immediately go to the worst case scenario. And even when it's just, we just wanted to check about this in this form and blah, 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 it takes me a while to recover from the injection of dread of having a kid who needs to be picked up because they're sick or something happened, right? So thinking even about that example, which I wish it didn't happen as it did, I need to recognize that moment that the number appears on my caller ID. I have a choice. I can let whatever potential scenario suck the energy out of me. I could be having an amazing day, inspired, creative, sharing all the ideal things we talk about. And in that 1 second, flush everything down the toilet, but by something that's not real. That's really the point I wanted, right? That sometimes, for example, you can read an article about some worst case scenario and you walk around afraid all day. For what? Who's in charge right now? You know who's in charge in that moment? The author of the article, the publishing house of the book. At the moment that you let what you've read, and I'm going to use that as an example, something that you've seen, drain your energy, make you sad, make you bitter, make you regret, make you angry. That's actually a really good one for these times that we live in. How many times do you read the news or an article or a notification from an app and it makes you angry? People walk around stewing, not because anything is actually wrong, but because somebody's opinion differed from theirs, and it makes them, how dare they think differently than me? How dare there be people that are different than me, right? And obviously the world is full of enough hatred. We don't need to contribute to it here. But the idea that we can choose how you know what? I don't want to be in a bad mood. The school secretary calling, but even before it, now I'm going to do this. Do this in real time with me, people. They're going to call me at some point this week, probably for something, the school, something innocuous. And I am going to, before I answer, because usually the answer is, oh my God, what's going on? I am going to breathe. The phone can ring 3-4 times. I don't have to jump on it. And I am going to preserve my energy, because that moment that I give over to the worst case scenario that doesn't exist, it existed once. I'll be honest with you. It happened once that I was like, ho, ho, hi, everybody. How are you? And my son had gotten headfirst into a fence kind of thing. But it was a few years ago and we were all seriously traumatized by it. But go with me. Let's choose this week that the person calling that we don't want to talk to is not going to drain our energy. That the meal that I have to cook, the obligatory dinner I have to make for my family, I'm not going to let it drain me. The mess in my house, nothing makes me more frustrated than the mess in my house. It is not going to take my energy. I am going to feed myself with the thoughts, the attitude, the energy, the nourishment that I need to walk into that messy house and say, you know what? It's all good. I love it. It's mine. It's my mess. I get to clean it. No, it's my family's mess and they're going to clean it. And I can get it done even faster and better when I'm not angry at them.
People are always wondering how to go to their next level in anything in life. And what slows a person down from going from one level to another, like what causes maybe spiritual constipation, it's a little backed up, spiritually backed up in any part of your life, is when, well, let's put it in the positive side. When something no longer bothers you or is affecting you, you're allowed to elevate to the next level, to the next situation. So one of the reasons why we say, let go and have consciousness, only so that we can maintain the elevation. When a person is being controlled by something, it means it's anchoring them at that level they're at. So they're not allowed to bypass and go to the next level until it's no longer bothering them. That's a pretty entry level concept that we talk about a lot. However, what happens when we do overcome something and we feel comfortable, and a lot of us know what that feels like? All of a sudden we have strength and we have consciousness, and we call it spiritual maturity. Our soul is elevated. We've drawn higher levels of our soul, as Kabbalah explains. We have 5 levels of the soul, which has 5 levels and then 5 levels again. So there's 125 total levels, and we elevate through these levels. And as we elevate through these levels, we feel a greater sense of strength and certainty and whatnot. However, have you ever had something that you thought you were done with, but all of a sudden it bothers you again? Or you thought that you had overcome and it comes back again?
Regression. We call that spiritual regression.
So we think it's regression.
Right.
What a lot of people don't know is that when you go to your next level, you have these new desires. And with these new desires, you feel some of the same neediness, but it's on a different level. You don't realize it. You think it's the old stuff coming back. And this happens to us. So it doesn't matter how long you've been studying or what you think you know from a knowledge point of view. As you go through life and you encounter a new level, a new scenario where you have to elevate sparks of light, the same fears and anxiety and initial selfish desires will appear. And that's not a bad thing. And if you think it's a bad thing, that's part of the negativity that is trying to take you down.
I think the best way to say that is, if you think it's a bad thing, you make it a bad thing.
That's right.
That's really the truth. That if I can look at every moment that I feel, and maybe this is the best way to work towards ending the episode, the antidote really is, even though, or when I catch myself, right? Inevitably, I'm going to catch myself answering the phone and rolling my eyes that the school is calling me. To catch myself in that moment and say, wait a second, no, it's tempting. I'm not going to go there, and come back with this elevated response. I can tell you that, especially when you look at, let's say, people, you have a fitness goal. When I say fitness, I don't mean you necessarily have to be going to the gym, but you want to get healthier. You want to lose the sugar addiction. You want to, there's so many levels of health and wellness, and we're going to continue to talk about that next week as well. So you say, I need to cut this out. I need to eat less of that. I need to stop eating earlier in the evening, for example. So the compulsion may continue to still be there, to eat the sugar, to this, what all the examples I gave. The knowledge that I get to choose, and I think I say this almost every week these days, that if I get tempted to go for the chocolate, to eat the ice cream at 10 p.m. or whatever it is, it's not a bad thing unless I decide it's a bad thing. What David was saying before is that every time you elevate to the next level, you're going to get tempted to regress. The fact that you're tempted, or that you even slip a little bit, is no sign that you've fallen back. Mm-hmm. It's that the next level asks you to not only to be able to grow your desire, but also to be able to grow your spiritual muscles. So what you were able to resist, maybe for the 3 months that you didn't have a piece of chocolate, you felt strong and empowered, and you learned to love broccoli again. And then you're at a restaurant or you walk by and you see that fancy schmancy gourmet chocolate with the truffles and I'm not a chocolate person, so I don't know what's exciting. What would be a good piece of chocolate, but it's there for you. You want it. And you think, what happened? What's going on here? I was good before. We even label it. I've been so good. I've been behaving. Now what? Know that you can actually, and I'm going to upset a lot of people here, it would reveal more light, if that's the situation, for you to buy the chocolate and enjoy it and share it and love it than it would to walk away feeling like a failure. That's the truth. It's not about the chocolate. The chocolate, guess what? The chocolate has light in it. You can reveal the light in it if that's your intention. It can also bring you down, and the choice is ours.
This week's energy is also called the Hod, and it's the gateway for inspiration. Inspiration can come from two sides. It can come from the pure system or the impure system. And how do I know? Some people call it divine inspiration. That the Creator is giving me messages, feelings, emotions, ideas, thoughts that come from a divine place, which essentially means I can get to where I want to get to in the fastest way without chaos. That's divine inspiration. On the flip side, a person can receive inspiration from the opponent, from the negative side. And it whispers to the person usually to engage in some form of instant gratification. But in this week, we can correct the spiritual pipes that draw divine inspiration from the positive side for the whole year. And so one of the ways we can correct those pipes is what we've been talking about this whole time, is where our desires are at, and what we expose to those desires, because what you desire is what you draw. Whatever is coming to you in your life now, it means that at some level, at least consciously or unconsciously, you're desiring this. And we've had this show many times, where what you watch and what you look at and what you study and the people you hang out with and the people you whatever, that all affects your desire. So this is the week that we can receive messages, we can receive guidance. We have the soul of a great being who left the world 2,000 years ago, who opened the gates. It was his spiritual responsibility to bring the wisdom of the Bible to its more secret, even though it's a secret, it's more simple, into what's called the Kabbalistic state, which is what we're teaching, all about cause and effect, all about how light and vessel operate, which is very universal. So he was the one who was responsible with his students to bring this wisdom to the world. And his soul and energy also exists this week. His name is Rav Shimon Bar Yochai. He's the author of the Zohar, which we're always referencing and quoting from as well.
I want to actually, David just gave me a great setup, and I'm going to take advantage of it. Divine inspiration is not just, I channeled this amazing idea, or I had a prophetic vision. To me, divine inspiration is being able to see the long-term impact of the positive or negative choice I have in front of me in the moment. And one of those stories that Rav Shimon Bar Yochai illuminates for me, I'm going to give you a really clear example of what David is talking about. And I'm pretty sure we talked about it maybe 3 years ago, so it may be time to talk about it again. There's a story in the Bible about really like 20-second version. It's Jacob and Esau that are twins. One's older, one's younger. One has the birthright with all of the land and the cattle and blah, blah, blah. Jacob is the little one who he just studies all day, and he's a mama's boy. And one day Esau comes home from the hunt and he's starving, and Jacob is making dinner. And Esau says to Jacob, "Give me some of that lentil soup." And Jacob says, "What's it worth to you?" And Esau says, "What do you want?" And Jacob says, "Your birthright." And Esau says, "Take it, just give me the soup." Now, that's sounds like a very biblical story, right? We don't really have birthrights anymore, and you don't inherit the land from your parents just because you were born first. What the Zohar teaches us about that story is it's all about instant gratification. And you can make it about hungry. Sometimes people, when they're hungry, they destroy their relationship. When they're hangry, they destroy a relationship, saying the wrong thing, being angry, judgmental, hurtful, etc. But in the big picture, what we're really saying, anytime we give in to those animalistic, egotistical desires, is, I'd rather have lentil soup. I have been spiritual all week. I listened to this amazing podcast. It inspired me. I've been meditating. I've been generous. I've been kind. But I'm going to get angry right now and be stuck with a bowl of lentil soup instead of all of the energy and all of the elevation I've achieved through all of the spiritual effort that I've mastered, at least in the recent while. So the recognition, the story has three. I'm bringing it up for three reasons. One is, if in that moment Esau had the divine inspiration, he would have known he was being tricked into something really, of course, there's a bigger spiritual story to it. I'm talking about the humanistic spiritual story. He would have known he's being tricked into losing everything that his future, and he wouldn't have done it. But he was so short-sighted, so reactive, so empty, so looking for the instant gratification, he couldn't see that. So there's the divine inspiration side. The second idea is also, of course, how the wisdom of Kabbalah decodes the biblical story, which, especially when you get into the Bible's teachings about how to plow your land and what happens if David's ox gores my ox. There's not a whole lot of practical application if you don't look into the spiritual side of that. So the Zohar is super powerful, and that's one of the things that the wisdom of Kabbalah gives us, is those life lessons, the understanding of those spiritual laws of the universe, so that we don't have to wait till the figurative ox gores the figurative ox. And the third idea is that in our own lives, what David is talking about is that this week we have the ability to enhance that long-range vision, that divine inspiration, simply by asking for it, being aware of that it's there, and understanding that the way that we earn it is when we're tested. And I don't know that we've talked enough about that in the show, is that...
Which one?
That I don't receive things just because I ask for them. When I ask for them, I actually am asking for an opportunity to develop that thing.
And it's interesting because when the Kabbalah say when you ask for something, you do draw it to this world, but actually that thing goes to someone else to hold on to it for you until you've earned it, which then goes back to what you said, right? So isn't that interesting? If you ask for your soulmate, you actually, that person, by the way, ask doesn't mean just ask. Ask means like a deep craving when you know you're ready to receive it. So asking also has 4 levels to it, which probably a whole nother show needs to be about. Asking is called a prayer. So when you pray or you ask in the right way, you draw the soulmate, but somebody else, you draw this person for somebody else until you're spiritually mature and ready to receive. So someone else is holding on to your treasure until you're ready for it.
And that act of effort, that's the key, right? In that moment that you're being offered the chocolate, the lentil soup, the praise, whatever is going to give you that. By the way, a really good example, somebody was sharing with me that they were having this issue, is they were feeling really bad about themselves, so they know who to call when they feel bad about themselves, because that person makes them feel better. It was actually a conversation that came out of last week's episode, that they feel better than other people. They know who to call, that they'll hear about the other person's miserable life and they'll feel better about themselves. Okay. The recognition that in that really, that action has a disguise of, I'm reaching out to a friend who is in a tough space right now. It looks spiritual, but if you're aware, this particular person was aware enough to understand that they're getting something they're getting a little, rush from it that helps them feel better for a little while until they start to feel bad again. The idea, the opportunity that she was able to recognize because she was watching last week's show, is that in that moment, if she can be there for that person unconditionally or resist the temptation to call that person when feeling low, that's actually going to help both her and the other person, right? The I don't know, you've talked about it before, that when you have like a parasite in the body, it leaches off of the nourishment that you're trying to give your body, so the body doesn't get it.
That's right.
The negative side is exactly the same. It's going to take all of the energy that we give it that could be potentially elevating us and nourishing our soul. So part of what we want to be able to achieve this week through the opportunity, the asking, as David said, but also being aware when those opportunities to delay that instant gratification, even if it's 5 minutes, even if you manage to walk away from that thing for 5 minutes, if that's hard for you, that's earning it. And David, one of the things I wanted to ask you about is, I noticed yesterday that you posted about the class that you're starting tonight, that there's new and... Tomorrow. It starts Tuesday, April 27th, if you're listening live. And if you're listening after the fact, you can also join it again. I wanted to hear from you what's new and exciting about it, because We've certainly given it 5,000 times before.
So this is my favorite class to give. Many of you who are watching us on this podcast or listening to us on this podcast, you've taken it either with me or another teacher. I'm going to do something new and different. I try to do it to be more up to date with the times. Obviously, a lot of the core content will be discussed.
The post-pandemic Kabbalah 1.
Yes, this is the post-pandemic Kabbalah 1.
Vaccinated Kabbalah 1.
And I want to go deeper. I want to kind of use a lot of the methods that we use on the Weekly Energy Boost, but also in some of my more advanced classes. And also, this is the first time we're doing it on Zoom where everyone can see each other. So will be a lot more interaction. And some of you know I like to workshop people live on the Zoom. And it's just a great way to see Kabbalah practically in action. It's a pay what you can model, as that's been really popular. So we have over 700 people already signed up. We're anticipating about 1,000 people to sign up. 500 of them will just hear the recording, and 500 of them will be on live. That's my guess. So if you want to join or can join, do so. Also, we are trying to constantly broaden our community to new people. We have very devoted, loyal fans, I would say, who love watching us and following us and listening to the wisdom. And some of you have heard Kabbalah 1 3, 4, 5 times, and you'll probably do it a 6th time now. But if you have friends you think will enjoy it, I always say, if they can come on for the first 3 classes of Kabbalah 1, no matter where they are in their lives, their life will change. So, and there's no financial barrier, because even if they don't want to pay for it, they just want to try it, they can. But of course, if they can pay something, and it all goes to a good cause, it goes to charity. So we'd love to have you on with us. And I think the link here is on the chat. And for people who are listening, can you dictate it for them so they can go?
No, they should just email energyboost@kabbalah.com and we'll send them the link. People have been emailing constantly since last week. We have people, I know that I've heard from people from Australia, from Germany, from all over the world. And I know that in the class that I'm doing on Thursdays, we have
like a big group too.
It is so fantastic. Like David said, it's on Zoom. So we're seeing each other. We're workshopping people. The difference is the time zone. So mine is 11 a.m.
Pacific time,
Pacific time, and David's is 5 p.m.
4 p.m. Pacific time.
4 p.m. Pacific time, so 7 p.m. Central. So one of the things we try to do now that the world really is one global force is to offer whatever works for people. So it's the same concepts, different teachers and different time zones. So whatever works best for you, we want to make sure that you have access to that.
And I'm also sending the information every day. I've been sending out text messages with audio recording of consciousness, as well as keeping people updated on classes that we're giving. So if you want to join my text message community, again, the number is 310-388-4573. Just text hi, and it's going to guide you to the process of joining. So almost every day, I like to.
And David, can people badger you by text that
way?
They
can badger me by text. Long questions might require a long period of time for me to answer, but at the very least, you can have a one-way relationship with me where you just receive from me. Receive from me wisdom.
Guys, you heard it here first. David is, in fact, a human being who craves apples in the morning when he doesn't sleep enough. So how relatable was that? That was so relatable, David. I thank you for letting everybody know.
I want you to know the things I struggle with. Looking
forward to the day when I struggle with apples. Thank you for joining us. Next week, we have a very special guest who is both a Kabbalah teacher and a naturopath who's going to share with us some amazing tips and tools that she's learned not only from her professional education, but incorporating those spiritual concepts into her practice. And I'm going to be fangirling it the whole episode, so hold me back. Have a fabulous week. Being aware of those opportunities that we spoke about. And as always, share, like, rate, review, and continue to listen. We'll see you next week on the Weekly Energy Boost.